My name is Alyssa Sommerfeld. I also work for the Alzheimer's Association, and I'm also a community outreach coordinator like Bonnie. My region or counties that I take care of are Dodge, Fond du Lac, Allegheny, and Winnebago. So what our position, we usually do a lot of these education presentations like this one today. So this is effective communication studies. We're going to break it up into 4 different people speaking. You will meet our other 2 speakers as they come up. There are dementia care specialists for Jefferson and Dodge counties. And then we're also going to have a panel discussion after our presentation with 2 caregivers from the area, so you will also meet them as well. In today's program, we are going to go over a few things. We're going to explain those communication changes that take place throughout the course of the disease. We're going to be told the verbal and behavioral messages delivered by someone with dementia and respond in ways that are helpful to the person. And we are going to identify strategies to connect and communicate at each stage of the disease. So communication, what is it? Communication is more than just talking and listening. This also involves sending and receiving messages through your attitude, your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language. Communication is a way to express who we are and how we relate to each other. Now, as the brain changes with Alzheimer's disease progression, people lose their ability to speak and decode language. So we're going to learn about better ways that we connect with people who have Alzheimer's throughout the course of the disease. So Alzheimer's disease is broken up into 3 stages. The early stage is mild, which I'm going to talk about that stage. Then we go on to that middle stage or moderate stage, and then into that late or severe stage. So as Alzheimer's disease and other dementias progress, people lose their ability to communicate their thoughts and their feelings through words. They also lose the ability to understand words that others speak to them. But they always maintain their sense of self, so it's important to respect them and respect who they were in the past, even though they may not be able to communicate like they once did. So in the early stage of the disease, there might be just a few noticeable changes. Maybe they're not remembering things as well. They just forget words on occasion, but maybe there's no recognible changes at all. So asking that person how he or she would like to be helped with words if they are having problems can be very useful in this stage. Language abilities do diminish as the disease progresses, and communication moves from easy to more of a hard conversation. But we want to use our emotions and our 5 senses to connect with the person. As care partners and caregivers, you are the ones who are going to have to adjust your ways to help communicate with that person who has the disease. And remember that the essence of the person continues throughout their life and throughout all these stages. So respect that person as the adult he or she is, and adjust your communication on what is meaningful to that person today, no matter what stage they are in. So some things you may notice in that early stage of dementia in Alzheimer's. In the early stage, you may or may not see changes like we stated just before in this way the person communicates. For some people, there may be some shifts in the ease with words or conversations. Some of those most common changes are difficulty finding those right words. So again, maybe helping them fill in the right words if you know what they're trying to ask or tell you. Talking longer to speak or respond. They also may withdraw from conversations. So if you're getting together for family holidays, if you notice they're being more quiet, maybe because they just can't follow along that conversation as well, and they can't put those words together, so they're withdrawing from those conversations. Maybe struggling with decision making or problem solving, so maybe they can't balance their checkbook like they once did, or doing simple math problems that everyone should be able to know how to do. So whether you notice changes in the way that the person speaks or not, communication in the early stage is crucial. This is the period in which everyone involved is adjusting to that diagnosis and is having their own thoughts and feelings about it as well. Remember that denial is a part of the disease for some, and while others, the emotions can be very overwhelming. So we want to all just come to terms with that diagnosis and emotions and just talk about it together, because communication is key. This will help you both accept that diagnosis, move forward, and discover new ways to live positive and fulfilling lives. So communicating through this process can also bring closeness and help everyone adjust more easily as the disease progresses. So we're going to listen to a video now. This is Martha Turney. She works for the Alzheimer's Association, and she's going to talk about what is helpful in that early stage.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
If that person is having trouble finding words, a quick and easy way, just say, hey, would you like me to help fill them in, or do you want me to wait for you to find that word yourself? But communicating this in the early stage is key, because then that person will get less frustrated as the disease progresses. So to connect in the early stage, one of the best ways to be sure that you're offering the help with communication is to ask directly. So if that person is struggling, again, to find those right words, you want to ask that person directly in front of them, not necessarily over a phone or through email or text. You want to be able to talk to that person in person. We want to keep our sentences direct and straightforward to help that person, again, avoid feeling lost in conversation. So those short sentences, not using big words, using more familiar words, that'll help them understand what you're asking. And just take your time as well, and be patient when they are answering you. We also do not want to talk down to them. Again, that person may take longer to find those words or put their thoughts together when they are answering your questions. So just allow that time, and you don't want to make them feel pressured or rushed. And keep in mind that conversational needs will change over time, so what works today may not work in a month from now. And just make sure that you know that you're going to have to do some changes as yourself as a care partner and a caregiver to help meet the needs of that person. We also want to be sure that we're including that person in any conversation we have, especially when you're going to doctor visits. We don't want to talk about that person in front of them. We want to include them in that important conversation so that they can put in their input, because they are still a person. They're still hearing what you're saying, especially in these early stages. And we want them to feel comfortable and be respected. And keep in mind, we don't want to make assumptions about a person's ability to communicate because of their diagnosis. The disease affects each person differently. We like to say when you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've only met one person with Alzheimer's, because everyone is different. Everyone's going to have different behaviors and communication, because everyone has different health issues, different history, maybe different ethnicities. That all changes how Alzheimer's and other dementia progresses. We also want to speak directly to that person. So again, making sure that you're in person with them, in front of them, speaking directly to them at eye level, saying their name so they know that you're talking to them. We also want to explore which method of communication is most comfortable. So maybe they would rather be in their home, just you two talking. Maybe it is through a text message or an email or over the phone. Whatever is most easiest and comfortable for them, make sure that's how you're chatting with them. And also just make sure you laugh. There's going to be silly things that happen throughout the disease progression, so making sure that you have that humor still, and that it's a great stress reliever when you're laughing, so it's okay to laugh. And let that person know that you're together through this whole disease progression. And just be honest and frank about your feelings, because we don't want to pull away our friendship and our support, because this person needs us, because they are going to go through a very hard disease, and they need our support. So letting them know that we're there for them is a big thing as well. So that is the early stage. I'm going to have our next speaker come up, and she's going to go through the middle stage.
Hi, I'm Heather James. I'm the Dementia Care Specialist in Jefferson County. So as Alyssa said, we're going to go ahead and talk about the middle stages. So in the middle stages, many changes of Alzheimer's affect communication. If you notice some of these changes in the early stage are likely more pronounced than the middle stage. So we'll see some increased difficulty finding the right words, using familiar words repeatedly, inventing new words to describe familiar things, easily losing your train of thought, speaking less frequently or withdrawing, communicating through behavior rather than words more often. So if you see a sudden change or something major, you might want to check with the doctor because it could be something more medical. Some other things include organizing words logically, reverting back to speaking in a native language. So if a person spoke Spanish when they were younger, as that progression occurs, they might go back to speaking Spanish. Using curse words, relying on gestures instead of speaking, so more pointing to things that they're trying to get that word across. Difficulty following a conversation or a TV program, and difficulty decoding what others say. Changes in the brain make tracking and decoding more difficult for individuals with Alzheimer's, and for that reason, people begin to use behaviors to communicate, and more often in the middle stages of this disease. So next we'll discuss some of the adjustments you can make to help you continue to support that person. So Beverly is a caregiver, and we're just going to hear what she has to say. Her husband has Alzheimer's.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
So Beverly kind of mentioned there to take your time when you're talking to the individual. It does take them longer to process the words, so giving them more time. You can't expect that person with a disease to behave as he or she might have in the past. They've changed. And if communication isn't getting the desired response, focusing on what you can change and what you are doing in that situation. When communicating with a person in the middle stages, approach is important. So you want to approach them gently, identifying yourself and approaching the person from the front and at eye level. So you're not scaring them, startling them from behind. Call the person by name and say your relation to the person. So walking into the room and saying, "Hi, Dad, it's me, Heather." This will help orientate the person and get his or her attention. Sometimes using touch can show that you care, even when the words are just about a task or something that's not understood. And a gentle touch can also help get a person's attention. Sometimes you want to make sure that they're okay with touch. Sometimes they've had a bad history with touch, so they might not, and they might become more aggressive. Don't criticize, correct, or impose your perspective. It'll backfire most of the time, so paying attention to facial expressions and tone of voice. Be calm and patient. The person can feel your feelings, so if you're tense and you're afraid, they might feed off of that. Also, remember to take the time to communicate. Give yourself and the person you're talking with enough time to respond, and it can take someone with dementia up to 40 seconds to process what's being said. So take your time. We're going to go ahead and listen to Rebecca.
She could sense my frustration, because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school, and she's like, "Don't disrespect me, and I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question." So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
So it can be frustrating for a person and for anyone with dementia when they're repeating those questions, statements, or behaviors. But rather than trying to convince the person that you to remember what was happening, it helps to accept that the person does not remember it as you do. Accept his or her perspective and respond from that standpoint. So when you join the person's reality, it takes time to see the world as he or she may be seeing it at that moment. When seen from his or her perspective, the person's behavior can also become understandable. So due to the changes to the brain that accompany this disease, the person will probably not be able to see your perspective. So you'll want to be the one who has to change what you're doing and go through where they're at. Joining the person's reality is key, helping the person have his or her say, and it provides soothing and reassurance to the person. To do this, you can take a couple steps. You can listen to figure out what the person needs or wants. This means paying attention to both the words and behaviors of the person. Keep in mind the person may be saying something about his or her feelings or needs, but may need something else on a deeper level. For example, I can still drive just fine. Also may contain the feelings, I don't want to give up my independence, so don't take that from me. The words, stop taking over my life, I hate it, may actually reflect the meaning of I hate this disease. I don't understand why I can't do things that I used to do. Let the person know you understand what he or she may be feeling, whether it's expressed through words or behavior or both. And answer any questions to address those issues he or she may be having. Most importantly, respond to the emotions behind the behavior or the concern. So example, you seem sad. Do you feel sad? And then wait for a response. If the person says yes, you might want to come up with a reason why they're sad. Do you miss the way things used to be? If the person says yes, you could say, I do too, kind of reassuring them. If the person's communicating with behavior, see if you can identify and speak about the emotion behind that. If the person's rummaging through possessions, it may be a way of communicating boredom or needing something to do. Hitting during bathing can be a way to say that a person feels too hot or too cold or uncomfortable with being naked or feeling out of control. And finally, only after you've responded to the emotions, reassure them and redirect the person by encouraging him or her to do something that may shift their train of thought. So continuing to say, I'm glad to be here with you today, let's go outside for a walk. Or in this way, you're gradually moving the person from feeling sad to doing something that might lift their spirits. And you want to take your time and be patient. When you're communicating with an individual with Alzheimer's, the more you slow down, the less resistance you might receive, because the person won't feel rushed or unable to keep up pace. Rushing leaves the person feeling frustrated, inadequate, upset with themselves, and then resistant. So by taking your time, it'll avoid frustration for everybody. Using short sentences and basic words and speaking clearly will help and be specific. So sometimes helps to offer the choice you think best at the end of a sentence. For example, rather than asking, what would you like for breakfast? You could say, it's breakfast time, would you like eggs and oatmeal? We're giving two choices, not here's the whole list of things you could have. It's helpful to give the person many different cues as you communicate, and this reinforces your words and clarifies your messages. Providing visual cues and gestures avoids sudden movement. Using gentle gestures and pointing, but avoid making sudden gestures may startle the person. Writing things down for the person if you're able to. Notes, calendars, labels, post-it notes, things that help the individual to recall where things belong, what needs to be done, or who in the person's life or who might be coming over. Labeled photos can also help a person keep track of names, relationships in the middle stages. Offering answers in your questions, so it's much easier for someone in the middle stage to choose what to eat for lunch. For example, if the question is not open-ended, what would you like for lunch, Bill? Is a question that might leave a person overwhelmed and stuck for an answer. So it's the world is open, right? You don't know what to say. But if it's, Bill, I'm making sandwiches for lunch, would you like ham or turkey? The person can choose from those two. And if the last option mentioned, if you seem stuck, you can just say, how about hand? See if that's a yes or no. Although you may have reminders in place, plan on needing to repeat information as you go along. The person might need to be able to decode what's being asked of them, and it might need more reiteration or saying it a different way to understand. For example, if you need to get the person into a shower and they always resist the task, rather than saying it's time for your shower, triggering that resistance and shutting down, you can say, let's go get cleaned up for the day so you'll be ready for Cindy's visit this afternoon. Quizzing the person, asking him or her to try harder to remember, or saying that he or she knows the answer doesn't always work. So trying harder just leads to frustration on our part. And it's much more respectful and helpful to give the person the information he or she needs for a task or situation along with those reminders. So letting the person know that you're there and listening and that you hear his or her concerns is very helpful. The facts are far less important than the person's feelings and his or her view of reality. These feelings and perspectives are very real to the person, and even though they might not match our reality, we want to help them so that they feel comfortable. Providing reassurance that you're together and safe, and that you're there to help them. Letting the person know that you hear and understand thoughts and feelings he or she is experiencing, and as long as there's not a safety issue, agree and go with the flow, meeting them where they're at, is also there to help.
May I ask a question? Going back to the previous information on communication in the middle stage, repeating, does foreshadowing work? Saying, in an hour, we're going to be going over to see your son, blah, blah, blah.
It depends. So time can really get lost in a lot of folks with dementia. So that sense of time and place doesn't always work. So in 5 minutes, you might get the same question. Sometimes setting a timer can help. But when's the timer going to go off? You know, that anticipation, that agitation can occur too. So we can talk more about that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Making any adjustments to the situation that's necessary and then redirecting the person to another activity as needed can help validate.
So I'm Rob Frizzle, I'm the Dementia Care Specialist in Dodge County. And I'm going to talk about the late stage. You can connect with those aspects of the self by remembering the person's history and respecting his or her preferences. The goal is to help the person feel content and happy whenever possible. Keep talking using familiar words, names, phrases, poems, passages, or songs. Whenever you get a direct response from the person or not, the sound of your voice helps maintain the connection between each other. Using the 5 senses is a great way to connect the person with dementia in the late stages. This may be done through touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste.
Can you give some examples of that?
Yep, we'll talk about each of those different areas.
Okay.
Yep. So we're gonna watch a little video here about Sandra and her connecting with her mother in the late stage.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. And my husband noted to me recently, he said, you know, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So it can help to try and understand the person's feelings in the late stages. Connecting through the 5 senses can be a way to connect that feels comfortable to the person. So here's some ideas to connect through touch. Maybe feeling different fabrics, identifying shapes, lotions and hand massages, identifying everyday items in a bag by touch, visiting with animals, molding non-toxic clays or dough, holding the person's hand, or stroking his or her arm or back. And that can be a great way to connect non-verbally with a person. So sight, maybe we laminate brightly colored pictures to look at. Watching videos of animals, nature, or travel, looking at photo albums together, viewing photos of famous paintings, favorite settings, or prominent people from the past, watching birds or looking at aquariums, painting with watercolors. Those can all be things. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is when we're looking at pictures or reminiscing, really the importance of not having the expectation of them remembering who that is or where it is. We're looking at those pictures and it's time that we can spend together. If those stories come up, great, it's a bonus, but that's not necessarily our expectation. So sound and music are some of the most powerful ways to connect in late stage. Listening to familiar music, especially those favorite styles that stir those happy memories. Maybe it's jazz or big band, hymns, or classical music. Listening to recordings of sounds of nature, farms, cities, animals, or babies. Identifying musical instruments by sound. Listening to songs or speeches in the person's native language. Reading books, poetry, scripture, and newspaper articles to the person. Letting the person hear the gentle tones of your voice. So smell is one of our most basic senses. Although the sense may diminish with age and the disease progression, consider using some of the ideas in the slide to connect with somebody. So maybe it's a small plastic bag with that the person can smell under supervision. Things like herbs or spices work well. Cotton balls with essential oils on them. Grass clippings or fragrant flowers. Teas or coffee beans. Maybe it's a scented lotion for a hand massage. Scented candles that you can smell together. Remember to use scents that the person will find familiar and pleasant, and keep any allergies in mind that the person may have. So well into the late stage, people with dementia enjoy tasting their favorite foods and flavors. So here's some things that we can try. As the ability to swallow diminishes, we want to keep choking hazards in our mind, providing only what the person can safely swallow. So things like their favorite foods, maybe those favorite home-baked goodies, popsicles are good, flavored drinks, ice creams and puddings are another one that are real popular. And so to summarize, maximizing our communication and connectedness with the person with dementia involves adhering to a few principles. So understanding what is and isn't possible to change by understanding all that you can about the disease. Staying up to date with the latest information and scientific breakthroughs on Alzheimer's disease by attending workshops and conferences. Know and accept the cognitive and functional limitations of the person to help you set realistic expectations for the person. Remembering that the person is an adult with a sense of self and should always be respected. Remember, you use feelings to connect. You convey your mood through the actions and your tone of voice. The person will pick up and reflect those feelings. So stay focused on positive feelings for the person to increase the understanding of his or her reality. Demonstrate your caring to the person. Listen, observe, and try to decode what the person is communicating about his or her need or wants. And then by joining the person's reality, we can better understand what is needed. Communication involves throughout the stages of Alzheimer's, and adapting to those changes requires commitment. By adjusting your communication as the disease progresses, you learn to connect deeply and meaningfully enhancing your relationship with each other.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
Yeah, so the better we can take care of ourselves as caregivers, the better we're going to be as caregivers.
So what I'd like to do now is take some questions from you. But actually, before we do that, there's a few things I wrote down that are usually frequent questions that I'm asked in regards to communication. And I'll just kind of add to some of the things that were presented here. So one of the things that people will always ask about is understanding why doesn't that person always remember who I am? And I know it's a memory issue, but it affects communication and relationships. How many of you have heard of the Alzheimer's timeline? So if I were to put, how many of you have done a timeline in history class? I'm sure the bulk of you have. So if I put my life on a timeline, so when I was born, and let's say I'm 80, all the good things and bad things that have happened in my life are on that timeline. It's just the way it is. Well, at 80 now, my family has noticed I'm putting milk in the cupboard, I'm putting my shoes in the refrigerator, I'm not recalling my appointments, I'm repeating things all the time. So they take me in for an evaluation. I go into a diagnostic clinic, they determine that I have Alzheimer's disease. So in actuality, I've probably had symptoms for 10 to 20 years. They've been mild, we wrote them off to other things. So if I were to take an eraser to my timeline, I could easily go back at that point, weeks, months, even a few years. Short-term memory isn't just something that happened yesterday. It can be things that have happened for a few years. So my memory of those things might be very spotty, or I don't recall them at all. Well, as my illness progresses, it's taken that eraser and going further and further back in time. I'm losing the newer memories and going in reverse. So now my reality is back when I'm maybe in my 40s or 30s. So when I was in my 30s, I didn't have a 40-year-old daughter. My daughter was little. So that can explain why they don't recall their relationship with you. Or I don't recall who my husband is. When I was married, in my 30s, my husband had this nice set of hair, dark brown, this bald man coming in the room. I don't know who he is. But generally, I'll know the face, and I'm comfortable with that face. But I can't always tell you that relationship. So that's something that's key when you're communicating with a person and they don't recall who you are. That's part of what's going on. Their timeline has gone in reverse. But it doesn't mean that you don't have a relationship. One of the things I always share too when it comes to dementia, it's no longer really a head-to-head connection you have with that person, because my ability to reason, my ability for logic is becoming lost. But I still feel. So that relationship is really more heart to heart. That's how we connect. What has meaning for that person. So even in the late stages when Rob was sharing favorite foods, favorite sounds, favorite textures and things like that, we have to use more of those other senses to connect. But that's also part of that heart to heart. I don't really need words. And when you think about communication, over 90% of our communication is nonverbal communication. It's not the words we use at all. It's the expression on our face, the gestures that we use. So those are some of the things I want to add to that. Curse words. Curse words come out a lot, don't they, for those of you who are caregivers right now. The interesting thing about curse words, they are kind of saved in the part of the brain that is more intact from the disease. So if I can't find a word I'm trying to say, boom, that curse word's there. And I know families are devastated. Oh, grandmother would never say those words. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Well, just because grandma didn't use the words doesn't mean she didn't know them. She just knew better than using them. Now she's lost that social filter and they're coming out. So that's the key for curse words. Music. Music is a great tool for connecting with a person. Music is one of those last memories we lose. So when we even do training with law enforcement and the fire department, we talked about them utilizing music to help calm that person down in that stressful situation. Because when any of us are under stress, our abilities decline. And if I already have a reduction in my abilities because of the disease process, can you imagine when I'm under stress? I may not be able to find any words at all to talk. So using things like that. And I will tell you to anyone here, if you ever end up being a caregiver for me and I have dementia, do not make me go to bingo. Bingo will not make me happy. Will not reduce my stress. Take me to the aviary because I am a bird watcher. That's one of those things on that list that would connect with me. And the other quick note, actually I had two more things, I guess. As far as sentence, we talked about it takes them longer to process words. The brain is moving slower, or the functions of the brain are slower. We're really dealing with brain failure, like kidney failure, heart failure. The brain is no longer able to function as it was meant to function. So we're dealing with brain failure. And with communication, if you were to take a 10-word sentence, in the early stages, and we tried to show that in the program, how things can change, I may only get 7 out of those 10 words. By the middle stages, I may only get 5 out of 10. By the later stages, I'd be lucky if I could get 3 out of 10. So in order to enhance our communication, the importance of repeating the sentence or the question the same way, because by the time you finish that sentence, I'm still processing word number 3. And I always tell people, you use the analogy of a rat in a maze. If you want that rat to learn how to get through the maze, you have to put them in the same maze every time. Or it's like us going through a labyrinth. We have to go to the same labyrinth to learn when do I turn right, when do I turn left. So if we share the sentence in the same way, it's giving that person the ability to process those words. Do be careful about words that have multiple meanings. And I'll give you an example. I had a gentleman come into my office and I told him to pop a squat. He's like, who do you want me to hit? I'm like, no, I don't want you to hit anybody. So for him, pop meant to hit. So we have to understand that abstract thoughts become more and more difficult. That's why time is more and more difficult for that person to understand. Things, the mind has to work more with concrete thoughts. So that I wanted to add. And the other one, I love when they talk about nature sounds, and one of the last slides for again connecting with people the later stages. And I just have to share you a funny story because we have to be careful about what sounds we're using depending on that person. So this is when I worked at a facility, a memory care facility, and the family brought in one of those sound machines to help their mother sleep at night. Well, one night, all of a sudden, when the aides came in and said, Bonnie, Gracie's doing this really weird thing. She's going in her room and doing this. Well, we went in there. What sound do you think was on the sound machine? Cricket. She was trying to find that cricket and kill it. So it wasn't helping her sleep at all. It was actually causing her some agitation. So knowing what sounds bring a person comfort is really important too. And that's part of, we don't have the forms here, but if anyone's interested, we do have a personal history and interest form that is really good to record that information about your loved one. So if any other individuals are coming in to help you provide care, they know a little bit more about that individual. So again, they can make those connections that count. So that's all the extra little tidbits I had written down as we were going through the program. Any other questions that people may have? Yes, sir.
You use the term dementia and Alzheimer's interchangeable. Is there a difference between the two?
Dementia is basically a global term for a syndrome, which includes memory loss, language changes, personality changes can all be underneath that category. And then underneath that, you have the various illnesses or diseases that have dementia related to it. So a way to look at dementia would be like equivalent to the term flowers. Then underneath that term of flowers, you have daisies, roses, and so forth. So under dementia, you have reversible causes. So reversible causes for those symptoms could include sleep apnea, malnutrition, dehydration, sensory changes. I don't know about you, but I know if I'm not hearing correctly, I can't respond correctly. There's other things that they're looking at for brain tumors. Constipation can even cause symptoms of dementia. Multiple medications. So those are things, if there's concerns about a person's memory, a good doctor is going to look at all those things first. Is it something that's like a medical condition that we can, with treatment, reverse what we're seeing? If it doesn't fit into that area, then they start looking at, okay, could it be Alzheimer's? Could it be Pick's disease? Could it be frontotemporal dementia? Could it be Lewy body? Again, there's over 70 different illnesses that have the syndrome of dementia related to it. Why Alzheimer's and dementia tends to be used interchangeably? If you did a pie chart of all the dementias, 60 to 80% would be of the Alzheimer's type. It is the most common. Does that answer that for you?
Yeah.
And we have on the table over here a brochure on the 10 warning signs, and then another brochure on the basics of Alzheimer's. And it goes into that as well. Any other questions? All right, Alyssa, you want to come up and share a little bit about, oh, sorry.
What's the average time between the early and the late stage? How many years?
They say the general lifespan, if you want to use that term, is 8 to 12 years. But I've known an individual who had Alzheimer's for 25 years, and I've known people who've had it for fewer years. It depends on what other medical conditions they have as well. But about 8 to 12 is the general length of time they talk about.
All right, so we have lots of amazing services throughout the Alzheimer's Association. This purple sheet that all of you have, go through pretty much all the main ones. All of our services are free, and they're all throughout the state of Wisconsin and throughout the nation. If you're looking for services in a different state, definitely contact those chapters. Those programs feel that things can be different, but mainly the same resources. So one of our big resources is our 1-800 helpline. So this is a number anyone can call. It can be the person with the disease, a caregiver, a family member, a friend. And you can call and just talk to our licensed social workers on the other end, or ask them about where there's a presentation. If you're in a crisis moment and just need some help, need to get calmed down a little bit, de-stress, they're there for anything 24/7, holidays, at 1 in the morning. So that's a really good resource. You all got little magnets with that number on as well. Another resource is our website, alz.org. So some of the things on there are our Alzheimer's Navigator. So you can make a plan and make a plan how to work with a person who has dementia, all their medical history, their diagnosis, their doctors, so forth, and then link that to any resources in the area, which goes into our community resource finder. So that can help you find facilities, in-home health care, even other resources such as memory cafes, which I'll talk about that in a second, and support groups. And that is used for your the zip code, the area you live in, and that'll bring up anything in the area. These are facilities that have given their information to us, so that doesn't mean every single facility in the state is on there. And we cannot recommend a certain facility, but we always say if they're on our website, they took that time to actually give us the information, so start with those first. And then we have ALZ Connected. This is an online support group in a way. You make an account and you can chat with others who are going through the disease process, caregivers, and just connect with them because they're going through the same things all of you may be going through as well. If you don't want to call that 1-800 number, you can talk to people on there. And it is confidential because you're making more of an account, so not just anyone can log on or see that on the internet. You actually have to make that account. We have that Alzheimer's and Dementia Caregiver Center, so this helps caregivers, give them stress reliever tips, more resources, again, where our education programs are, where our support groups are. And then our safety center, so that's more safety issues. So if someone with dementia has wandering problems, or maybe there's some other safety issues, we have lots of tips on there. We also have the ALZ.org Find Us. So this is where you're going to find those support groups. We have support groups all throughout the state. Some are just for caregivers, some are for the caregivers and the person with the disease. Some are on specific types of dementia. So if you're looking for a support group in your area, please check that out. We have a bunch in the Jefferson and Dodge County area. Actually, there is a purple packet that you all also got that has the Wisconsin chapter support groups in it. It should be fairly updated, but you can always check our website too for the most updated information. And then if you want to get more training, like this education that we did today, you can go to training.alz.org. You'll see this presentation. You'll see other presentations we do out in the community, especially in these winter months. If we cancel a presentation or you can't make it, you can go through it online, and these are free of charge as well. And it just goes through the presentation without a person speaking through it. And then if you did speak in a different language or have a family member that only speaks a different language, we do speak in many different languages through our helpline, so they can call that number and get the information they would like. Some of the other resources that you all have at your table is our clinical trials trial match pamphlet and card. So this is how we're ultimately going to hopefully find that cure for dementia. So if anyone is interested, you can fill this information out. And clinical trials can be for people who are very healthy, people who are younger, for older, who have the disease. But you can participate in internet research studies, in-person research studies. So filling this card out is going to get you more information on what you would like to do and what's in your area. So if anyone's interested, just fill this out. You can leave these at the table. We'll pick them up after the presentation today. We also have our advocacy cards. So these are the big long ones. So every year in around February, March, we go to Madison and talk to our senators and representatives and ask them to help pass bills that are related to dementia and caregiving. We also ask for funding every year to help our research going to find that cure. So just filling this out helps support us going every year and telling our representatives that we need to still support all of these bills to be passed to keep help us find that cure. And we hand deliver these every spring. Yes.
February 11th this year.
What's
February 11th of 2020.
Yes, it is February 11th, 2020 of this next year. And if you're interested in actually going to Advocacy Day, anyone can go. So it's a day event, and in the morning we go over what bills that we would like to help get passed, and then we talk about how you can talk to your representatives and Congress members, and you get then in the afternoon to go to the ones that take care of your counties and actually get to speak to them or their representatives or staff if the senators aren't there that day. So if anyone is interested in actually going to Advocacy Day, see me or Bonnie, and we can get that information to you. Otherwise, fill this card out and leave it at your table as well. One other resource, we have our little e-patient cards. These are great for if you're going out to eat with a family member or a friend that has dementia, or going somewhere in public and you just want to slip it to your server or whoever you're working with, like maybe at the bank, instead of having to go through a whole explanation saying my friend here, my family member has dementia, they may take longer to respond. You can just give this to them without having to go through all that. We do have some extras up here if anyone wants more. And also has our information on the back of the card too. There is another sheet that says Everyday Care Ideas for Caregivers. You can pull this up into a little booklet. This just goes through some different things like hygiene, wandering, sundowning, pacing, and tips that can help you as a caregiver go through it more positively instead of having that person be very agitated. So that's a great resource. There's another sheet about volunteering. We always have lots of volunteering opportunities throughout the Alzheimer's Association. Presenting presentations like this, but more simpler ones, like our Know the 10 Signs and Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. Also helping with support groups and memory cafes. So memory cafes, I didn't talk about these. These are early stage engagement groups. You get together, sometimes it's at a library or more of a social place, and each month you do more of a social event. It is for that caregiver and the person with the disease. Sometimes it involves an art project or going on an outing, but it's really just to get that person to still be social even though they have dementia, and to be around other people who are going through that disease process as well. And lastly, there are two different, there's a survey that we would all like you to fill out, and then also the sign-in education form. Those we would love.
Melissa, no.
What's that?
They don't have to do the sign-in sheet.
They don't have to do the sign-in sheet?
As long as they're registered, and those who weren't, I already got the
Okay,
top.
then forget that one-page sign-in sheet, but we do need the evals back. So if you all could please fill those out sometime before the end of today, that would be great, and just leave them on your table too. And I think I hit on all the main resources. Bonnie, was there anything else you want me to talk about? Okay. And I think right now we're gonna take a break. We do have snacks, so please grab some. It's gonna be about 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, any other questions before we take a quick break?
Yes.
I just have one question. I know you get a lot of things in the mail to contribute. Is there one organization that seems to have better use of funding to contribute to?
So are you saying all these are from the Alzheimer's Association or different?
I think there's different ones. There's like a research one, I get, and there's.
So for any of the ones through the Alzheimer's Association, most of the funding, about like 77%, goes to research. So it doesn't matter what, if it was like for our walk or for our gala or for something, our longest day, that funding all goes together. So for the Alzheimer's Association, you donate once for one event. Don't feel like you have to do it for all of them. You just may be getting it 3 times for different events. But yes, there are other places out there.
Yeah.
And Bonnie, I don't know if you want to hit on that more.
I was just gonna say, for donations to the association, you can always designate where you want that money to go. So if you want it purely for research, just write on there for research. If you want it to go to programming, put on there for programming. Otherwise, it goes into like a general bucket. And out of that, 70 cents or 77 cents, somewhere in there, goes directly to services. And then the other, actually it's even a less percentage, that's administrative. So if you go to the website, they actually show what the percentage is out of a dollar bill, what goes where. But yeah, you do have the right to designate where you want funds to go.
And Bonnie, can it either be designated for your county?
Yeah, you can put down if you want it for services in Jefferson and Dodge County. Yes.
Do you ever put a presentation on for like alternate states for the caregivers?
For which now? I'm
For
sorry.
the caregivers do any of the.
Oh yeah, all these are available for care. These are, all the programs we provide in the community are open to anybody in the public. So caregivers, professionals.
Do it right at their facility then.
Oh, no, we don't necessarily do it at the facilities. You talk about for professional caregivers like CNAs?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do those at facilities. And actually for CNAs, we have online education available for them.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Yes.
So I'm here because my mother died of Alzheimer's. And I wonder about myself. And so are there things that we can do pre-first stage or first stage to help ourselves while we still are aware?
There's a lot of research out there right now on ways that we can reduce our risk. We can't necessarily say they're protective, we can't say they're preventive, but we seems to show that there's a reduction in risk factors. You know, having a family member who's had the disease puts our risk at a little bit higher than the general population. But the 4 areas that a lot of the research is showing, first of all, is exercise. We want to keep good vascular health because vascular health is definitely connected to our brain health. We need the oxygen and blood flow to the brain. So exercise-wise, they're showing about 150 minutes a week. So you can break that into 5 days for 30 minutes. And there really should be some cardiovascular part to that. Another area is nutrition. The Mediterranean diet keeps coming up consistently as the better diet. That or the DASH diet, or you might have heard of the MIND diet, which is kind of a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH together. The other area is social engagement. Being out there involved with other people. Why do you think that would be important?
Very important. I'll agree with that. I do that myself.
Good.
I go to bingo, I play cards, I'm in with other people in different conversations that come up. Maybe the past.
Key. That's one of the key things. Because with social engagement, especially with conversation with others, I don't know what you're gonna say. So I really got to be thinking and really paying attention to what you're sharing, and then trying to go through all those file cabinets in my mind, all that knowledge to respond back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes with the old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it. And the 4th area is doing new and challenging things. Challenges for your brain. So if you like doing jigsaw puzzles, which are good, maybe try a 3-dimensional one. You gotta up the ante. You know, we can't create new brain cells, but we can create new neural connections. And how we do that is by doing new things. So if you ever want to learn archery, which I want to do, come join me, we'll do it together. Because that's the other thing, if you're doing new things or exercising with people, you're covering a couple of those same things, a couple of those at the same time. And you actually tend to be more consistent with it too. Because you're having fun with another person. And actually, I was probably the most consistent in going to the gym when I had my friend, because she'd call me and say, well, Bonnie, it's snowing out, did you still want to go? And I was always afraid I'd disappoint her, so I'd say, yeah. And then I found out later from her, she'd do the same thing because she didn't want to disappoint me. So it's a good thing we never really talked about it, because otherwise we probably would have gone on some of those days. But that's the 4 kind of areas that research is showing right now that can, not prevent, like I said, but at least reduce risk. Yes?
Anything about statin drugs that reduce cholesterol? I heard something once that might help Alzheimer's.
The research did not really show any strong evidence.
No.
So they really haven't talked about that even. I mean, if you think Corey's been involved with the memory clinic like I was at one time, so we kind of hear about some of those things.
Yeah, I saw one article from something.
Yeah, they haven't really looked at that for a while. Just like aluminum. That was one of their first things.
Yeah.
Oh, don't drink out of aluminum cans, don't cook in aluminum pans.
How about lutefisk?
I don't know, that would cause me stress. Well, that's not good forever.
The things that I offer as the dementia care specialist through the ADRC would be cognitive screening, the SPARK program, which is similar to a memory cafe, but it's an art and culture based program. And so that is for the person with dementia as well as their care partner. So right now it's a rotating group. Horicon Marsh is one of the places. The Master Gardeners do a program, and then there's an art therapist that does a program. So it rotates between those 3 locations. And then next year there'll actually be 2 programs that are going on each month. We also have a lending library, so different activities, books, educational materials that are available. Dementia Live is a program that I do that's an experience-based program. It really gives people a better understanding of what it might be like to have dementia. So participants wear headphones, they wear goggles, they wear gloves, they're asked to do some tasks and get a better understanding of why somebody might be doing what they're doing, why somebody is responding the way that they are. Also, different resources that are available in the community, so support groups, educational events, things like that. I meet with families individually, whether it's in the office or in their home, those kinds of things. Doing educational conferences are all things that are available. Through the ADRC, there's some other programs like Music and Memory, which is setting up an individual playlist for that individual is available. We have several educational programs like Powerful Tools for Caregivers that are available. They're all free programs. Some other things, there's a caregiver grant, an Alzheimer's grant that people might qualify for. There's long-term care programs that are available. Transportation program that can get people to appointments or places in and outside of the county. Home delivered meals and meal sites. That is all available through the ADRC as well.
So in Jefferson County, we have a lot of the similar programs. We both provide memory screens. So I do memory screening events every month in a different location throughout the community. We also do them in office as requested, or in homes, or wherever an individual might feel most comfortable. We do the music and memory program as well, and the Fort Atkinson Library, Waterloo, and Johnson Creek Library are all set up to provide that service for individuals. So if you do think music would be an important piece to your person, you can go and set that up for free. We help set you up with research opportunities. So if you're interested in being a part of research, we can set you up with either the Alzheimer's Association or the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute. We also do Dementia Live, so that simulation of helping you to understand what dementia might feel like. We do Powerful Tools for Caregivers, which is a 6-week class for caregivers to learn how to better care for themselves. And Jean and I will be doing a class early spring, so watch for that information. And we also help provide dementia-friendly communities. So we do a lot of training in the community to help places become more aware of dementia and more comfortable for the person with dementia to be able to go to those places and feel like the staff understand them and can help them better. Our Aging and Disability Resource Center provides a ton of resources. So again, Medicaid, Medicare, it's open enrollment right now. So if you don't have your appointment for Part D, make sure you make those calls. They would love to hear that I'm promoting that because they're swamped. Transportation, we just got a new mobility manager in the county. So he is trying to make connections in Jefferson County, making it the easiest and cheapest rates for people to get to where they need to go, whether it's in county or out of county. We have adult protective services, dining sites throughout the county, so meal sites where you can go, or home delivered meals. Again, funding if you need it for different programming, respite programs. The list goes on and on and on. So between the counties, there's no lack of resources. So if we don't have it, we can find it or connect you with someone else.
So yeah, I strongly encourage, if you haven't started, to reach out to find out what's available in the community. I always recommend people to contact the Aging and Disability Resource Center. Since I cover multiple counties, it's hard for me to keep track of all the little details for services. So you really need to have that connection as well. And we work very well together. So if there's something that they feel that I can help you with, they'll let me know. If there's something I feel they can help you with, I will let them know. But really always start with the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. So for the rest of our program, I want to introduce Anita and Jean, and they can tell you their names again too. They are prior caregivers that have gone through the journey that many people are going through now. And I thought it would really be important to see how can we take the information that we saw in that presentation and how can we make it practical? I mean, it is practical information, but how do we take it and add it to our lives? And some of these things are new things that we have to learn, and they take practice. So I thought the best people for you to hear from are those that have been in that journey.
Hi, I'm Jean Hayden, and I provided care for my husband Frank.
And my name's Anita Martin. I provided care and helped my parents, both of whom had dementia.
When you think about the program that we talked about in those relationships, with your family member, what and when was the diagnosis given? First, also I would like to know, could you share with the group what your relationship was like with that person prior to the diagnosis and then after? And then a three-parter, I'm giving them right away. How did it change, if it did change, that relationship?
And I might answer that in three parts also when she gets to other questions. So I'll start off by sharing that my husband Frank and I met in the fall of 1973. We both worked at John Deere Plow Planter Works in Moline, Illinois. He was fairly shy and had one of his friends ask me if I would go out on a date with him. I said, well, he'll have to ask me himself. So Frank did. We dated for 8 weeks. He asked me to marry him, and we were married in September. So I guess he wasn't that shy after all. We have 2 children, Tim and Becky. We moved to Horicon in November of 1986 for work. Frank and I were best friends. I pretty much made the decisions because it was less stressful for both of us. I learned early on in our relationship that his main response to everything was, whatever you want. And he meant it. He was the most selfless, and loving husband and father. If I had to wait for him to make a decision, we'd still be sitting in the parking lot at work to go on that first date. So I made sure I started making those decisions. Didn't mean that we didn't talk about the important life choices, but it was just worked out well for the way we handled our relationship. I started noticing changes in Frank's personality, initiative, and emotions in the spring of 2004. He started talking less, and he would say inappropriate things or laugh at things that were not funny. For instance, I remember specifically the one time, the tornado that went through Waupun in 2004. We lost a good friend from work, Arnie Gallenbach, and we were all, then they'd ask for volunteers to come to the Gallenbach's property in Waupun to go through the field and try to find personal items. So Frank says, I want to do that. I said, oh, okay. Well, yeah, we can go do that. So we're standing with a group of people waiting to start the process, and someone explains how it seemed like the tornado had been going in a path and then all of a sudden swerved and went right at Arnie's house. And Frank started laughing. I was mortified, as were several people standing over. I didn't know that. That was my husband. Frankie cried over McDonald's commercials and every Disney movie, okay? So that was not free. Also then, about a month later, I got very sick and in June of 2004 and was at the hospital with 106.8 fever. So my kids called Frank's supervisor and told him that he needed to come to the emergency room. So he got there and I'm laying there packed in ice and he walks in and he goes, yeah, my boss said I had to come over here. What? Who are you? You don't even have any concern whatsoever. So, I mean, major red flags for me then. So then you start thinking, okay, and talking to the kids, that's just not like your dad. Something's going on. So I then scheduled an appointment for his yearly checkup with the doctor and said that for his memory and concentration. I said, I don't know if we need a marriage counselor, but there's something going on. So our doctor ordered a CAT scan, and the results of that CAT scan showed possible early onset Alzheimer's. That was in August of 2004. He referred Frank to the memory clinic in Beaver Dam, and where he went through more extensive testing and a PET scan. And on Friday, November 12th, at 5:00 p.m., I'm sitting on my couch, and Dr. Miller calls and tells me that Frank has frontotemporal dementia. He can no longer work or drive immediately. And he's at work. And he's 53 years old. So I'm like, what? You know, that's one of those moments that, there's that certain life-changing moment where you know exactly where you were when something happened. And, they all say John F. Kennedy, you know where you were when you heard that. Elvis Presley, I know where I was when I heard that. But this is a moment that, I remember sitting on the couch, I could hear his children laughing in the background, so he was calling me from home. So it was at that moment that I'm just going, what do I do? So my first thing that came to mind after crying and finding out from him how you spelled it, because I didn't even know what word he said, was to contact the Alzheimer's support group. I needed education and I needed to support. The next morning, our son came over and helped me tell his dad what the doctor said. And his main worry was that he was going to get in trouble for not going to work anymore. So Tim explained, no, Dad, you don't have to go to work anymore. They're going to pay you to stay home. They are. Yeah. So it was at that moment that I became a caregiver and our relationship changed forever.
So both my parents developed dementia, which I said earlier, which seemed to get worse after each of them had a major stroke. My mom had hydrocephalus, which is fluid accumulation on the brain, and that developed at the age of 70, which carried with it significant changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. My mom was always a strong-willed person, and with the dementia, that part of her got significantly stronger, and not always in a good way. Her internist referred us to a neurologist who did scans and a spinal tap and confirmed the suspected diagnosis. She had brain surgery to put a shunt in to drain off the extra fluid from her brain. And she did really well memory-wise and in other ways, mostly back to her usual self for the next 10 years. Something I wanted to say about hydrocephalus is that many times it's very treatable. It's not a reversible condition, but many times if it's diagnosed and it's the cause of dementia-like behavior, if it's a treatable condition, then people can go back to pretty much their usual type of living. That's not always the case, but that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get the right diagnosis, because in that case, it was treatable. So my mom did well for 10 years, and then her shunt failed, which is not real uncommon. Those shunts don't last forever. And it required emergency surgery, and there were complications with that surgery. So for about 3 months after the surgery, she had a lot of severe symptoms of dementia. They improved as she recovered and as her shunt was adjusted properly and things like that, but mild symptoms did persist. So after that, she went from living in an apartment to an assisted living setting. About 7 years later, she had a major stroke, and during the last probably 2 months of her life, the dementia symptoms got worse again as a result of more or less the result of the stroke. Now, my dad's situation was different, and just to explain a little bit, my parents were divorced for about 15 years before my mom developed her hydrocephalus. So my dad was diagnosed with probable frontal temporal dementia, which you heard about a few minutes ago, also possible vascular dementia. After my twin sister and I were able to convince him to go for a memory screening. We told him it was a senior health assessment in order to get him to the appointment. And it was, but it really wasn't. He was diagnosed in 2010 and passed away in 2012 after, again, a major stroke in the spring of 2011. When they were trying to figure out exactly what type of dementia my dad had, they did have difficulty because they believed that there were some underlying mental health challenges that he must have had all along in his life or for a long time that hadn't been diagnosed. So some of the things he was experiencing, they felt may have been partly due to the other mental health challenges. My relationship with my dad had always been challenging over the years, and as his dementia and his other health problems progressed, eventually the relationship actually became better, especially the last year or so of his life.
And what's important that they bring up too is that they both are dealing with different types of dementia. Jean, obviously her husband having frontal temporal dementia. Anita's mom had more of a vascular related type dementia. So you're gonna see some differences in behavior. So frontal temporal dementia is more like behavioral things that you see first, not memory issues. Whereas with an Alzheimer's type dementia, you're gonna see the memory issues as the first thing. So knowing those are some things when they go in for an evaluation, they're looking for that background. What symptoms did you see first? How long ago did you see them? So it's not a simple paper pencil test. There's a whole battery of tests that need to be done. So they mentioned about PET scan, MRI, and so forth. So just to be aware of that, and I appreciate that they mentioned those things. Especially getting in, with your mother and talking about, identifying that there's something going on here that we could treat that could actually reverse some of those symptoms initially. So knowing that we can't make an assumption that it's always going to be a irreversible type of dementia. There could be other things going on. So as you think about the material that was presented in today's program, when and what changes did you see in your loved one's communication? And part of what we talk about, communication again isn't just verbal communication, but also behavioral, because when I'm losing words, my behaviors are going to express what I'm trying to say. So you want to share that? Jane, we'll start with you.
Frank was very easygoing, and so I was really blessed that he didn't challenge me or become aggressive through our entire journey. And I know that I was blessed with that because I had seen other cases. One thing that changed with his reduction of speech was why. Frank, come sit down. Why? Frank, come on, let's go get in the car. Why? So it was like he was a child again, and the why bugs me as much now as it did when my kids were little. You get that why, 10, 15 times in a row. And it's hard. We have to remember to keep our patience and understand, that it is his brain. He did become, he really started having trouble carrying on a conversation. He would repeat words and he became very parrot-like. At the time, our grandsons were 2 and 5. So when they would come over, they would not say, "Hi, Papa," because Frank would go, "Hi, Papa." So Alex would come in at 5 and he'd go, "Hi, Alex." So Frank would go, "Hi, Alex," and send it to, "Hi, Seth." And Frank would go, "Hi, Seth." And that was their way to connect with Papa. So I love that. They caught on very early, that Papa was different and special. And another thing that really changed in his behavior at the time is with frontotemporal dementia, the way our doctor explained it to me at our very first meeting was, Gene, he's gonna be and tend to become a person that you can put in a chair and he's not ever gonna get out. You know, everybody's different, like they say, one person with frontotemporal is different, but Frank, he was right on the money. If Frank saw a chair, he was in it, and he did not get out. Eventually, his brain did not tell him how to get out of bed or out of a chair, and that started very early on. So we had to then go over, and once you got him up, he could walk, but it was just that the brain wouldn't tell him to stand up or get up.
So my mom was always a heavy smoker, and she never left the house without three things. Her purse, which had in there her lipstick, which you never go anywhere in your life without lipstick and eyebrows, and her cigarettes. So we knew there was a serious problem when some people picked her up to go on an outing, and she didn't bring her purse, which had her cigarettes and her lipstick in. She locked herself out of the car, and then instead of going over to the neighbors, which were people that had been living there, you know, like for 40 or 50 years, she just stayed in the car with the window down until our nephew who lived there came, like hours later. So we knew there was a problem. She started to have subtle personality changes, and one of the biggest things we noticed was she was losing her sense of humor, and there were certain sayings, colloquialisms, things that we often would use in speech with one another, and she was very familiar normally with those things, but then she would be like perplexed and look like, wait, what? And then you'd have to try to explain this type of thing that was a normal part of language. With both my parents, as their dementia progressed, they used a lot of terminology like the thing, and they were talking about various different situations. If they couldn't come up with the word, it was the thing. And then my mom, when she had different problems with the dementia over the years, if something didn't quite make sense, she'd say, that's really weird, that's really strange. And sometimes it really was weird and strange, but sometimes it was something that in earlier times would be something she could very easily understand. So those are some of the areas. And then during the time that she was having difficulty, she seemed to have lost like a couple months when she was ill. And it was around the time that we had the heavy rains in 2008, you know, there was flooding. And it was also very hot. And she was in a long-term care rehab hospital for a while to get better and get therapies and things like that. So it was very hot outside, and I came in and I had the least amount of clothing I could wear and still be decent because it was really warm in the hospital. And I had some other health challenges with, you know, and I was having hot flashes. And so I was dripping wet sweat, and I'm taking good Kleenex, I'm cleaning the sweat off my brow. And she says to me as I'm leaving, and she was still verbal and everything, well, be careful driving in the snow, Anita. And I'm like, my first reaction was to say, what? You know, and I had to catch myself, and I go, okay, Mom, I'll be careful. So she still was, you know, my mom, and she was still concerned about things, but somehow or another, she just didn't get like quite what was totally going on as far as the weather. So that was an example. And then I also wanted to share one other thing that happened, which is really odd, is how the mind can just be so unpredictable. And, you know, and I think people who have had Alzheimer's and loved ones that have had various different forms of a dementia can really relate to this. But while she was recovering and her body was getting used to the shunt, and before they adjusted it, which they needed to wait for a number of weeks after her surgery with the type of shunt she had, it wasn't safe to adjust the flow of it for a while. So they had to wait. And so during that period of time was really when she had some pretty severe dementia symptoms, and somehow or another, she was still communicative, she could still speak and understand a lot, but she had this thing where it was real time and there was warp time. She actually, the first time she said warp time, I'm like, what? You know, is this Star Trek? Is this Star Wars? And she had some kind of thing in her head where she wasn't sure if it was current time or if it was back in the 1980s. And for some reason, that's where she was stuck. And that was a real traumatic time for her because my parents went through a pretty tough divorce. So she would start saying things about, you know, is there a wedding coming up? I'm like, we have a wedding coming up. And I'm like, we don't have a wedding coming up. And then she'd start saying other things. And then she said this, well, are we talking about real time or wartime? I go, I don't know. What are we talking about? So I just want to share that because that was most people.
I assume with it Alzheimer's time, you go back to there. So the next question for you is, what was your aha moment that led you to make those changes to help your communication with your family members?
I had several aha moments. Most of them during the first 5 years. I remember one time, it was 2 weeks after Frank's diagnosis, so it was November of 2004. We were putting our Christmas tree in its stand, Friday after Thanksgiving, tradition. And he'd only not been working for 2 weeks, so we're out in the garage. And you know, when you put a Christmas tree into the stand, sometimes you have to use a shim, you know, just to get it lined up straight. Well, I'm watching him do that, and he's got the shim, and he's pushing it down like this, rather than sliding it down so that it would be along the stem of the tree trunk. And I'm going, it was a wow, he doesn't even know how to put the shim in anymore. And that he'd been working 2 weeks ago. So I know that he'd been having problems at work that they just hadn't shared with me. You know, because if he couldn't figure that out, I know that he was doing other stuff incorrectly. So that was a big aha and realization that Gene, yes, he does have this disease. Because my kids will say I was in denial for a while. And I'll say, no, I wasn't in denial. I knew we needed education. I knew that, you know, things weren't right. But I would still have those moments, lapse of judgment, when, oh, he can do that. No, he shouldn't have been doing that type of thing. So that was one aha moment. There were several safety aha moments I had. One, and I'm saying that so that it can get on your radar. I think once we have something on our radar to watch for, we can feel a little bit more in control, because otherwise everything's out of control, you know? So one day Frank told our daughter Becky that he was thinking about cutting off all of his fingers. Ooh. So we don't know whether he was going to do it. Was he just talking? So, we took all of the knives, sharp knives, put them in a box and put them in the bottom cupboard. And I kid about this because, you know, I need to get that box out of there and get rid of it. If I haven't used it in 15 years, I certainly don't need it, right? You know how we all have that stuff that we put away. But it was a very weird thing that happened to us, and that scared us all. There was another time when I walked into the bathroom and Frank was dumping a bottle of Lysol down the drain. Well, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but he could have been drinking it. Yep. You know, so like a small child, now all the chemicals and cleaners all had to be put away. So I want to say that stuff to get it on your radar, because those are the things that we don't think of until it happens. So maybe if someone can think of it before it happens to them, then that's what I'm supposed to be doing. My most heart-wrenching aha moment, I want to save that one for the end. That's fine.
So the first time that my mom developed troubles and had to have the brain shunt put in, we were really learning about hydrocephalus and about different forms of dementia, and really, you know, in the very early stages of being a caregiver. And we were waiting for the surgery to take place. and she got mixed up in her apartment and couldn't find the bathroom. Her apartment wasn't very big, and that was a bit of a concern. And then the other thing that happened, which it's still really hard for me to talk about it, and this happened in 1998, but she forgot how to tie her shoes. And, you know, it was just, I can't say anything more about it. It was just very, you know, when you think about that, it's just very intense.
So how did you change your communication style or strategies? You know, the program talked about different strategies to really help enhance the interactions that you were having with your family. Just maneuvering through the ADLs, the activities of daily living, is a very difficult transition. Meal times can become stressful, and they had talked about that a little bit. It used to always be a time to sit down and talk about our day and just normal things. When it became clear that if I'd ask Frank what he'd want for dinner, I would get this blank stare, I knew I had to go beyond that. And so then I would start offering him the two choices. They suggest, you know, Frank, do you want brats tonight or do you want burgers? He would usually say the last thing that he heard, burgers, you know. So eventually you move beyond that to where I just give him. I just wouldn't even ask him anymore because then it was, well, eventually he would speak. Frank wasn't able to speak for the last 6.5 years of his life. So I would just give him. And I'd make the choice for him. Unfortunately, in 2007, Frank became double incontinent. So we needed to assist in all of his toileting and bathing needs. I was blessed that my sister quit her job in Moline and moved up to live with us, to assist with Frank. So we were the main caregivers that way. My daughter also moved back home and she assisted because Frank became 24/7. But he was still able to, at that time, express his dislike on the intrusion in the restroom type thing. He would push our hands away, or he would be able to say, no, no, no. So my sister and I figured out the way to remove some of Frank's anxiety while taking care of these duties. He loved music, and they said that in the previews also. So we would begin singing. You know, for instance, You Are My Sunshine. He loved music, he loved to sing. So he would look at you. So then when we would do that, when we're combing his hair and all that. For the shower, because you do still want him to keep a little mobile. You want him to be able to do stuff. So you give him the wash rag and you start with 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. Hey, he was so intent on looking at our faces to see what we were, 99 bottles of beer. It said he was watching us to be able to say what we were saying. And by the time we got to 70 bottles of beer, that shower was done and he was happy. You know, so it just, if you want to call it making it enjoyable, it was manageable without becoming very stressful. So I recommend sing whatever song you want. But he was very, very intense on watching us. So that would be one of our.
So in communicating with my dad, I learned not to disagree with him and not to challenge his reality, even when it was much different than mine. And that was really hard because of our relationship from young on. And to give an example of one of the things that happened, he wanted to connect, he wanted very badly to connect with people that he hadn't seen for like 40 or 50 years. And he became very angry when I couldn't readily find them and get them on the phone. And these people had moved away. I had no idea what state they lived in, and I had told Bonnie a brief story, and I know we don't have time, but it ended up that, you know, he was really getting frustrated and upset with me, and I said, you know, I've looked, I haven't found them yet. And he's like, well, why haven't you? And just really giving me, you know, trouble, and I didn't want to try to say because they're long gone, I don't even know if they're alive. Well, it ended up that I found a man with the same first name and last name of a gentleman of the same name that he was in the Marines with in California, that I called, who lived in the Milwaukee area, and it was not the same man. Oh. But they were stationed in California in the Marines, different, you know, units at the same time, and they had like an hour phone conversation. Oh. So I thought that was really a blessing and just an odd thing that happened. And I thought, well, you just have to go with the flow, and we went with the flow. And when we realized it wasn't the right guy, I thought he was going to just terminate the conversation. He was having a ball. So it all with my mom, I really had to change the information that I shared with her because she liked to know what was all going on with the family. And you know, there's family challenges, and some families have more challenges than others. And so if I would tell her what was going on that wasn't the most pleasant thing with one of the family members, she got very, very upset, and then she would really like fixate on it and things like that. So I realized that, you know, just had to really not go down those roads with her. As things progressed a little bit with her, it was more difficult to watch TV and those kinds of things that you often do when you visit someone in a facility. She absolutely did not like anything like Halloween or scary shows, which, you know, for a while during October, that's all there is on almost. So what I ended up doing is buying some tapes of Golden Girls. And the tapes of the Too Cute with the cats and the, you know, the puppies and the kittens, and you know, we could enjoy that together and laugh together, and it just was more pleasant and less of an unpleasant kind of an emotional experience for her. So we just had to figure out ways to enjoy each other's company and laugh together, but not really go into deep, heavy issues or that type of thing. My dad loved music, and so when he was still able to go out, he enjoyed listening to local, you know, like at the local brewery, there was some music, and at the downtown square, so we enjoyed the music together.